Okay, so today's daf yomi is Bava Kamma daf Nun, Bava Kamma 50, and today's daf yomi we're going to start on 49b, around 8 lines from the bottom. So the Gemara cites the Mishnah. We learned Tanan how you pechuted me'asar tvachim. If there was a ditch that was less than 10 tvachim, v'nafal asocho shor chamor, and an ox or a donkey fell into it, umeis, and they died. Pater, then since it's less than 10 tvachim, the person will be exempt. But v'im huzakbo, if the ox or the donkey got ruined by it, then we're going to say chayev, that the owner of this is going to be um, liable for the damages. Nafo Asoko, we're on 50b, around 10 lines, around 7 or 8 lines from the bottom. Nafo Asoko Shor Ochamor, let's say an ox or a donkey fell into it, umes, and he died. Pater, we're going to say under those circumstances, he's exempt. What's the reason why he's exempt if it's less than 10 tvachim? Isn't it because there's no impact there on the ground? Isn't this like Rav, who says that the reason why if your animal falls into a pit, the owner of the pit is responsible not because of the impact on the ground, but because of the odor in the pit or the air in the pit. So isn't this a proof? Isn't this a proof for Rav? Gemara says, isn't this a proof against Rav? Gemara says, no, well, mishum delays be'avoah. No, the reason why he's exempt is because there's no odor there since it's less than 10 tefachim. So Gemara says, well, if that's the case, but why if he causes damage, is he liable? At least be'avoah, there's no odor there to cause the damage. Gemara says, there is odor, but there's not enough to kill. Amri ein havoah misa v'yesh havoah nezikin. There is no odor to kill, but there is havoah there is odor to cause damages. Gemara tells us a story. Ahu Sora de Nafal Arisa. There was an ox that fell into a swamp. The Dalai, it fell into a irrigation swamp. Shachte Mare. So the owner of the ox quickly came along and slaughtered it because he was worried that if they start looking at it, they'll discover that the animal is a treifa, and therefore the animal, because it got ruined, it got hurt, and so therefore he wouldn't be able to shecht it so quickly before everybody came along. He slaughtered it. So Tarfei Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said, no, you don't. I'm going to say it's treif. I'm Rav Nachman, Ishakel Mari Dahai Tura Kaba de Kim Chava Azal. If this master of this ox had not been so quick to slaughter it, said Rav Nachman, and if he had just taken this kava flour of Azal, Tana Be Midrasha, and he had gone to the base medrash, if he had only been willing to do that, then what's going to happen is he would have said, the rabbis in the base medrash would have taught, that if you kept this animal with you for 24 hours, it would be okay. So all you had to do was go and wait 24 hours, and then we wouldn't have had to make a treif, because then we would have known it was kosher if it survived 24 hours. Then, surah, the Shava Kamma Kabin, he went to lost his ox, which cost several kabin. So we see from here that Rav Nachman says that you're responsible just by falling into the swamp. We see from here Rav Nachman Yesh Chavasa the Pachos Me'asar Tvachim, that this swamp, presumably, it was understood that the swamp was less than 10 tefachim, and yet Rav Nachman will see that the impact even less than 10 tefachim can cause the damage. So how can he do that? But what about our mission, which says that if it's less than 10 tefachim, the ox or donkey dies, and there is exempt. My time because we're not worried about the impact. So how come you say you're worried about the impact? So and why did you make a treif? So on top of 51a, the Gemara says no. Mishum delays be'avoa. No, the reason why our Mishnah says he's exempt is because there's no odor. There's no odor there. There's no air at the bottom of the well is bad, but there is impact. And so but if that's the case, but if there's no havel, why if he damaged him is he liable? The Gemara says but there's no odor. There's no odor for causing the death, but there's the odor for cause damages. That's why if he was huzak by, he'd be responsible. Amrulay. So the Gemara again challenges Rav Nachman, who says it's treif that this animal that falls into a pit that's only 6 tefachim deep, he said, was treif. Base a skila gavoa shtei komos. Let's say you have a execution site for a person who needs to be stoned. They was higher than 2 levels. It needs to be 2 levels high. And in addition to that, the person's actual height is Harekan Shalosh, so we have 3 levels high. And if you're going to say that you could kill the person by throwing them off of the roof onto the ground, even less than 10 tefachim, why do you need to go so high off the ground? Just throw them off lower. Gemara says, well, according to you, you should only have to do 10 tefachim. It's based upon the fact that the verse says, love your neighbor like you love yourself. Now you would think today, you give your speeches at your gathering and say, love thy neighbor. You don't really think of this interpretation. What does it mean, love your neighbor? Give him a good death. I mean to say that even a person who's worthy of punishment, you have to treat him with dignity and allow him to die quickly by not torturing him. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, so make him even higher. Why is it only 3 stories? The Gemara says, no, the reason is mishum de minovel, because if you take him up too high, it'll be disgusting. So again, he would die from 6 tefachim, but we want him to certainly die, so we take him up higher. Eisvei, again, we challenge Rav Nachman because it says ki yipo anofel mimenu, that when it comes to the laws of a makkah, which means you have to put a fence around your roof to make sure nobody falls off from it. It says because otherwise some person will fall off from it and then it'll be blood in your hands. Mimenu, from it, but not onto it. What does that mean? Means it follows. Let's say there was a public domain that was 10 tefachim higher than your roof, and it fell into it. It fell from the roof, from the public domain into your roof. Potter, you're going to be exempt. But if the public domain was deeper than your space, asar tefachim, was 10 tefachim deeper, and it fell off your roof into it, you're liable. And if you're going to say like Rav Nachman, that even if it's less than 10 tefachim, you could die, why does we have to say here that it needs to be 10 tefachim? Even 6 tefachim, the animal could have died. So the Gemara answers, Shani bias. So Rav Nachman's answer was, no, we're going to say that a house is different. Why do we say a house is different? Why do we say the house is different? Because we're going to say the kol pachos miyasara, that anytime you have less than 10 tefachim, lav bayasu, it's not going to be considered a house. Meaning to say, if it's less than 10 tefachim, it's not considered a house. And so therefore the Torah says, only on something that's 10 tefachim high is it considered a house. Well, if that's the case, if the house is 10 tefachim on the outside, we're going to remove from the roof and the plaster and the other parts of the house. And once you remove those parts, that you're going to find that migavai on the inside, there's not 10 tefachim. So why are we calling it a house? Amalek going to chak migavai. No, the Bryce is talking about a case. Chak is where you form something inside by carving out around it. So basically, it's like from the letters. You know how to form letters in the Torah by being chak tochos, by just like pouring the ink on and then chiseling away the ink to make the letter. You can't do that. So to here also means what we're talking about here is where you dug out the inside, and so that therefore inside has 10 tefachim, even though the roof itself is also 10 tefachim. Well, Gemara says, if that's the case, kilo ave nami me'abraya sara mishkach sodavi me'gavaya sara could go in the chakak beit fei. The Gemara says, well, if that's the case, even if it's not 10 tefachim on the outside, you could have 10 tefachim on the inside, where somebody chiseled out the inside, and so then it should be a house, even though it's lower outside. So the Gemara says, you're right, okay. So the Gemara therefore says, Ella Hainu Taima to Rav Nachman. Sava, Rav Nachman's logic was as follows. These are the position, Mi Krese de Toro Ara Kamehavi, from the belly of the ox to the bottom of the pit was how much? Well, the belly of the ox to the ground was Arba. Harisa de Dalai Kamahave, and the irrigation canal was how much? That was 6. Shita Asara, that comes to 10. Ishdakach de Kimechabe me Asara. So when he impacts the ground, he's impacted on 10 tefachim. And that's why he says it's for sure that the animal would be impacted on 10 tefachim. So therefore, if that's the case, Al Masnisin, the Katani Ma Borsh, our Mishnah that talks about what's a pit, Shu Kedela Amis Yud Tefachim. So if that's the case, Af Kol Sheyesh Bo Kedela Amis Yud Tefachim, B'shita Nami Sagi. Why do we say in the Mishnah that you require 10? You should require a 6 tefachim deep pit. That's it. So Ami Masnisin di Gandar Abor. Our Mishnah is talking about a case where you fell, where the animal fell into the pit, so not where it was standing upright. So that's why the two cases are different. So Bor Shal Shnei Shutfin. Let's say you have a pit of 2 partners. Avarlav Harishon Veloki So. So the first partner went there and he didn't cover it. Vasheni Veloki So. And also the second partner went and didn't cover it. The first guy went and he was negligent, he didn't cover it. The second guy went and he was negligent and he didn't cover it. So what do we do under these circumstances where neither one covered it? So the Mishnah says, Hasheni Chayev, only the second person is liable. Gemara says, Amri Borshal Shnei Shutfin Hechim Mishkachas. How do we have a pit that 2 people are partners in it and they're responsible for the damage? This makes sense according to Rabbi Akiva. That if it's in your, like Rabbi Akiva said on yesterday's daf, if the pit is in your own domain, you're liable. Then we can have such a scenario where both own the courtyard or bor shel shneim, and they both own the pit. They have kiru rishuson, v'lo kiru boron. They declared their pit ownerless. They declared the area around it ownerless, but not their pit. But if you hold like Rabbi Shmuel, that if it's your domain, you're exempt. So how would it ever be that you're responsible? So how are you ever going to be responsible if it's in public? If it's in public, if it's in public, how are we going to have a pit owned by 2 partners? If you want to say that, if you want to say that both of them appointed an agent for Amrila Zil Karilan, and they said to this agent, "Go dig for us this hole," and Kari Vazel Karilahu, and he went and dug for them the hole. Ain't shliach advar avera. No, that then the agent himself would be the one who's responsible, because you can't have an agency for sin. V'idikara Hi Chamisha, the Hi Chamisha. And if you want to say the first person dug it for 5 tefachim deep, and the second one came along and dug it for another 5 tefachim, the stalkulahu ma'isarishon. Well, when the second guy comes and digs 5, he's overridden the first one. So the Gemara says, "And Hani Chola Rebbe." It makes sense, and it makes sense according to Rabbi Vilni Zakin, according to Rabbi that who we're about to learn soon, that the first person's actions are still there. And so therefore, also the first person will be responsible if an animal fell in and died. But if we want to say, if the animal fell in and was killed, then only the second person is responsible for the death. And the Rabbanan say that both for death and for damages, only the second person is responsible. How can we have such a scenario? So I'm Rabbi Yochanan. We can have such a situation. You go into Akru Shneyan Chulya Bebas Achas Ve'ishlimu Asara. So we can have this scenario that both of them at the same time basically stuck their shovel in the ground, and they both picked up a clump of earth at the same time, and thereby made it 10 tefachim. So it's a very far-fetched scenario, but that's how it could happen. I guess like they're digging the tunnel from 2 ends. So the Gemara says, "My Rabbi, my Rabbanan." Where do Rabbi and the Rabbanan teach this principle? The Tanya we learned echad achofer bor tisha. Let's say person A comes along and digs a pit that's 9 tefachim. Uba achar v'ashlim el asar. B comes along and makes it 10. Ha'achron chayev. Then we're going to say the second person is the one who's responsible. Only the second one's responsible. That's the position of the Rabbanan. That's only the second one is responsible both for damages and for the death of the animal. But Rabbi says, Rabbi Omer Achar Acharon Lamisa, we say that the second one is responsible if the animal dies as a result of it. But if the animal doesn't die, then we're going to say they're both responsible for the damages. Because to get to damages, you don't need 10 tefachim. To get to Misa, you need 10 tefachim. My time with the Rabbanan. What's the basis of the Rabbanan that only the second one is responsible? The position of the Rabbanan is as follows: Amar Kaki Yiftach v'Chayichra. It says if you open and if you dig, if you're responsible for the opening, Al Kriyo Kol Shekain, for sure for the digging. El Havi Korah Achar Korah. It's to tell us that if somebody digs after the first guy dug, Shasilik Ma'isa Rishon. So then, under those circumstances, he's overridden the first action, and only the second guy is responsible. Rabbi Amrocha Hanul Mitzrach Tzrichi Kedamrinan. So he says no. The Rebbe says no. We needed to say, like we said back on yesterday's daf. Why do we need to say ki? We needed to say both cases ki yiftach v'chayichar. That's what we said on Nun Ahmed Aleph. Remember at the top of the page, Rebbe said why we needed to both say ki yiftach and ki yichra. What was it exactly? It was exactly. Hold on, just to remind you. The case the Rabbanan say ki yiftach v'chayichra. I might have thought that opening enough was enough, and that the if you dug it, you weren't required to cover it. Okay, so then the Gemara says, but according to the Rabbanan, nami mitzrach tzrichi. But according to the Rabbanan, you also need it. So the Gemara says, Ella, hainu time with the Rabbanan. So what's the reason why the Rabbanan say only the second guy is responsible? So the pasuk says, Amar ki yichrei shpor. When a man digs a pit, v'lo shnayim, echad v'lo shnayim, one and not two. V'Rabbi Ahumi, there's no joint liability. V'Rabbi, they say, Umi ba'alei ki yichrei shpor v'lo shorpor. When a man digs the pit, but not an ox. V'Rabbanan trei ishpor ksivi. The Rabbanan say, no, it's written ishpor twice. Rabbi, I did kasav high. No, when it says one, and therefore it writes the other. Gemara says, fine, even if you say only one is responsible, how do we know it's the second guy? Maybe it's the first guy who's responsible. Gemara says, no, let's look at that. The pasuk says, the dead one shall belong to him. The one who caused it to die, he's the one who gets the carcass. But don't we need that verse to tell us there's an ox that was disqualified from use in the temple, shenafo abor, and it fell into the pit. Potter, you're exempt from damages. Because it says the dead animal belonged to him. Only somebody who can keep the dead body. But in this case, since it's the temples, he doesn't get to keep it. So Gemara says, yeah, Amri, and that's we're talking about a case. Then the verse is coming to teach us if we the Bahuda Misa, that in that case it's the one who caused it to die, that's what the Torah is referring to. And so he's the one who's responsible for all the damages. So now the Gemara says, well, let's teach some other laws about a pit owned by partners. Let's say one person dug the pit for 10 tefachim. The next guy comes along and makes it 20. And the third guy comes along and makes it 30. And then the animal falls in and dies. All of them are responsible. The Gemara says, but then if one guy digs it 10 and the other guy plasters it and he does all sorts of sealing activities on it, only the last one is responsible. The top of from a base, top of 51b. Do you want to say hard Rebbe? One is the position of Rebbe who says that the first guy is responsible. for the damages. And one is the position of the Rabbanan who say that the second guy is always responsible. Gemara says no. Amar Rav Zvid hava Rabbanan. Both cases are the position of the Rabbanan. Ad kan lo kami Rabbanan achron chayiv. When did the Rabbanan say that the last one is responsible? Only when the first person didn't do a size, an amount at Shir Misa, it's amount of death. But where the first one did an amount the size of a death, then we're going to say, I feel Rabbanan modu de kul chayav. And even the rabbis would say that everybody is responsible for it, that both of them are responsible. But what about the fact that when it says that if the first one plastered it and put tar in it, that is the equivalent of death, and yet we still say the last one is liable. So the Gemara says, "Amri Hasam shloya bo hevel misa." There was not enough odor in the well to kill the animal. Ba'acher ma'osif ba'hevel misa, and then the other one comes and puts in the hevel for the death. So that's the scenario. Ikad Amri, or alternatively, Amar Rav Zvid. Hava ha Rebbe. Both of them are the position of Rebbe, who says that both of them are liable for the damages. Ki the ketani, like that which we taught, kulan chayavin, like that which we taught, the brisa that says that all of them are responsible. That makes sense. Shaya Shapir, that makes sense. Ha the ketani achron chayva, where he says that only the second one is responsible. Gon shloya bo havel. Where there was no odor, not for death or damage. And then the second guy, he added the odor, and so therefore the second guy was the one who caused it, so therefore he alone is liable. Gemara brings another point. Let's say he puts a stone on the pit, and that makes it 10. And so there, according to, this is the dispute. According to Rabbi, the last one is responsible for the death, and both of them are responsible for damages. And according to Rabbanan, the last one is liable for everything. So Gemara says, Pshita, it's obvious. We've already said that that's their dispute. Gemara says, no. I might have thought that it's only if he digs it deeper, because then the airspace that he made by digging it is what kills him. But if it was above where he didn't really do anything, his order didn't kill him. So we say no. Even if you put it on top, you're responsible. Rava says, let's say one person dug a pit 9 tefachim, and the other guy comes along and makes it 10. Vitam tefach, and then he closes up the earth of a tefach. V'silak avanav. So one guy dug it 9, the other guy does it 10. And then the other guy who did 10 comes back, closes up his tefach, and the silek avanav. And then he comes back and removes the stones. What will be the law? Mi amrina maida avid shakli, that which he did, he removed. Odoma nistalku ma'isarishon, or maybe we say, by doing this, he's removed the actions of the first one. Now this guy is completely the one responsible. So we don't answer that question. Teiko. Amar Rav Bar Chana. Amar Shmuel Bar Marta. It says Shmuel's mother's name. Bor Shmona. Umehen Shnei Tefachim Mayim. Let's say you have a pit that's 8 tefach deep, and from these tefachim, 2 tefachim are filled with water. Chayav. He's responsible. My time. I call tefach the maya. Anytime you have a handbreadth of water, so really, it's like 2 on the dry land, and so therefore, we're going to view it as 10. Let's say you have 9, and one of them is water. Since there's not a lot of water, there's no odor. Dilma, given the amik tfei, since it's deeper from the pit that is 8, there would be this bad odor. Another question. Bor Sheva Man Shlosha Tvachim. Let's say 7 and they have 3 Tvachim of water. Keeping the Fisha Mayim Tray, since there's more water, is Be'avoa, there's Havel. Odilma, or maybe keeping the Loa Mika, since it's not as deep, place Be'avoa. Again, take it. Gemara says another question. By Minei Rav Shizvi Meirabah. He says the following question. Your Chiva, let's say you widen the pit and the animal fell in. Mao, Amarei, Hare Mie Tevela, you made less odor there. So he did a good thing. Amoy Adarab, Kira Vezika, caused it to come closer because he made the pit bigger. Let's look and see. Why is this animal dying? If he's dying from the air there, well, there was less hevel as a result of widening of this case, of widening the pit, the mouth of the pit. So therefore, but if it was being killed from the impact, it only brought it to happen quicker. Let's look at it. If from that side, which he brought and it fell, then the latter will be responsible, because it caused it to come closer. But if it fell from the other side, he's less in the hevel by putting in the part from his house. So then he would not be responsible. It marbor sha'omka kirochma. Let's say you have a pit whose depth is like its width. Rabbi v'Rav Yosef to Amri Travayu Mishmei the Rabbi Chana Amar Mishmei the Rabbi Mani Chad Amar Olam Yesh Ba Hevel. One says there's always Hevel there. Chad Amar Olam Yesh Ba Hevel Ashi Rachba Yosar Omka. There's only Hevel until the width is greater than the depth. It says never airspace until it's never bad odor until it is deeper than the width. So now the Gemara says if the first one passed by and he used it and he didn't cover it, and the second guy came along and covered it and didn't cover it, the second one's responsible. The Gemara says, at what point does the exemption for the first one kick in? One says when the first one finishes using it, and the Chad Amar Mishayim Saro Odalio, when the first one gives the second one his pay. The Gemara says, Kitanai, this is the Machukas Tanayim Amadla, Mayim and Abor. Let's say you take out water from the pit to Balchavero, Amarlo, Hanechli, Vani Elomayim. Leave it for me, I'll take out the water. Given Chain Nicho, since he allowed him to do it, Mishtamesh. So therefore, since he's left the second guy in charge, the first guy is exempt. Potter. Rabbi Elazar Yaakov says, Mishayim Saro Odalio. The first one is not exempt unless he gives him his bucket. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Sarah Yesh Brera. He says that we have this concept of Brera. We'll discuss it more in Shabbos, but our future actions can help us determine the retroactive state of something. And Hami Didei Kamimala, Hami Didei Kamimala. But he says, if you say Brera, each one is filling up from his own. Rabban and Savri ain't Brera. So we don't say that. So this is a case from the Durham that we just had. So Ravina says they follow their logic. We learned the mission of Durham. If the two partners took a vow against each other, they can't go into the courtyard. Each one can enter their own. Gemara says, what's the nature of their argument? So says Rav Yaakov, says yesh spray, right? You can choose when they come in, it's clear that was their courtyard. And each one went into their own. Rabban and Savri ain't brera. Rabban said, no, you can't determine that. So we don't know which courtyard they went to, so therefore it's prohibited. Okay, we'll stop here. If anybody has any questions, let me know.